Hi, I'm Gareth.
Hi, I'm Jackie. We are Vegan FTA. Thank you for tuning into another episode of our series Activist.
Today we have the wonderful Sarina Farb. She's an educator, a scientist, and activist in the Kansas City area. She's on a mission to make the world a more peaceful, just, and sustainable place.
Having been raised vegan since birth, there is no better person to be in the position to take up this banner. For anyone who is a young vegan, or if you're parents who are raising vegan children, this video is an absolute must-watch.
We really hope you enjoy this episode.
We are so excited to talk to you today, not least because you are the first adult we have come across who has literally been born vegan. So can you tell us a bit about yourself for our viewers and how you have been raised as vegan from day one?
Yeah, so I am incredibly lucky that it was actually my mother she had a job as a microbiologist in the Midwest in the US here. And part of her job took her into like factory farms, chicken hatcheries, and animal testing facilities. And what she saw, and that was, around 1990-ish, led her to go vegan and not want her food choices to contribute to that. And she just decided when she saw that she was sort of one of the only people that made that change out of what she saw, and basically asked, when I have kids, what can I do to help them be people that will stand up when they see an injustice and not just look away and continue participating in this. So she decided then that she wanted to raise her kids vegan. And when I was born a few years later, that's what happened.
That's awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah, hearing some of your stories from like your YouTube channel and some like the articles and stuff you've been in, it certainly doesn't sound like you've suffered though from growing up vegan. In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, when you were 7 years old, your parents actually gave you the option as well, apparently, to whether you want to continue to be vegan or not. What did that choice mean to you at that age?
Yeah, so, and I want to just clarify, they didn't give me the choice to be vegan or not, and it was not framed that way. It was just framed as, up until that point, they'd been controlling my food choices, as any parent does. And it went beyond veganism. Like, we also tried to eat a pretty healthy diet. I didn't eat things that had like artificial colors in them. We tried not to do a ton of sugar. So just as any kid at a small age is like, hey, mom, dad, like, can I eat this? Or, I just always asked as a kid. And so when I turned 7, they basically said, we think you're old enough to make those decisions for yourself. So it wasn't like, you don't have to stay vegan. It was just like, mom and dad have been deciding if you're at a party whether you get to eat that or not. We're going to let you decide. But to do that, I basically had to, I had a stack of note cards with every ingredient that I might see on a label that, like casein or whey or milk powder, any of these, little things you see on labels that aren't vegan, plus all of the other things at that time that we didn't eat. And I had to then be able to read the word and then explain what they were, how they were made, and why we didn't eat them. And once I knew basically why my parents had been making the decisions they had for me, then I was allowed to make educated decisions on my own about what I ate. And all it really did for me is it helped me feel like I was in charge of what I was doing. So when kids or other peers would say, oh, well, why can't you eat that? Or, something like that, I'd go, oh, I can eat it. I choose not to eat it because I don't want to hurt animals.
That's so awesome. That's a brilliant way of just dealing with it all. And yeah, I'm sure, there'd be heaps of other parents watching this be thinking, what a great idea, So it's fantastic. And looking at you, you look so healthy, can't detect any signs of protein deficiency or, anemia or anything like that.
Yeah.
So Here in New Zealand, you know, that we're in the dairy capital of the world. And so, you know, there's a massive focus on needing milk for strong bones. And, you know, your story proved that too. I mean, as a child, you competed in gymnastics and did really well, you know, and yet you were one of the few that never broke a bone, never had any issues at all, never got injured, you know. Was there any discussion between you and your teammates or among parents as to why you never had any issues? Did any of them make that sort of connection?
I don't know that anyone, you know, and people don't really notice the people who aren't getting injured. They just notice the people that do. And it was just, you know, when you're in competitive gymnastics, and I did it for about 7 years, the thing that ends a lot of gymnast careers is a bad injury. Even, you know, at 10, 11, 12 years old, if you're, you know, progressing up the ranks, and then you get a really bad injury that gets you out of training for 6 months or a year, you fall way behind. And I wasn't at like a super high level, but I was doing stuff that an injury would have, you know, held me back. And I saw lots of other people who were out of training for a year who had these injuries, broke bones. And I didn't. I don't remember anyone really discussing it. I remember doctors more, when my sister and I were small, being very concerned that we were going to be calcium deficient. And, you know, even like wanting to run tests on us, getting the blood work back, and then like literally looking shocked, going, "You're not, like, your calcium numbers are great. Like, we really thought you were going to be calcium deficient," you know? So I remember doctors being shocked about that. I don't really remember talking about the health stuff with peers, or what other parents might have thought.
Yeah, it's funny about the calcium thing, isn't it? I mean, I was literally just talking to a vegan lady yesterday. We were just talking about unexpected health benefits and things like that of going vegan. And she's someone who struggled the whole time with brittle bones and fractures. And she had a fracture in her foot that wouldn't heal. And she went vegan and her calcium levels raised. And the fracture in her foot that, you know, she'd been trying to heal unsuccessfully for 18 months just magically just healed itself, you know? And so, yeah, who knew? More people need to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So while you're still in high school, you conducted your own molecular biology research project, which won numerous awards and, you know, got quite a bit of recognition, stuff like that. Being raised to think critically, you know, how important has that been for you in your science career? I know for me, when I used to study physics, you know, thinking critically is just, it's like the pot of gold, you know, for it. So how has it been for you?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I'm most grateful for, is I feel like being raised vegan and having this experience where everything I sort of knew to be true from day one didn't necessarily match the mainstream media, what mainstream health officials, government, etc. were telling us. I knew sort of from day one, like, what you hear out there may not be true, and therefore anything, like, I look critically past everything, and I don't just accept things at face value. So I feel like it's been incredibly beneficial. And I'm a huge fan of science, but real science, not corporate funded science with a bias, a huge vested interest. So real critical thinking that asks questions and follows the scientific method, really wondering and seeing what the data really show. And I think that is so important. And I think we need a whole lot more critical thinking, real critical thinking, and going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely makes total sense. You know, I mean, after reading your story, I was thinking, I wish I'd been raised vegan. I wish I was raised to think this way. You know, I did take everything at face value, you know, so, you know, better late than never. But for you, education has been such a fundamental part of your upbringing. And, you know, most parents don't tell the truth about the world we live in. And I think, you know, we were talking about it yesterday, that for the most part, that's because they don't know the truth either. So, you know, know, until recently, you yourself were a teacher of chemistry and environmental science. What was it like for you there, being vegan with like a captive audience, you know, knowing everything that you do about the state of the planet and what happens in the real world? Did you feel the need to sort of, you know, did you have to hold back at all when it came back to sharing things with your pupils?
Well, I'm really lucky that the school, I was not working in the public school system. It was actually a private high school. And they are very progressive and very concerned about environmental justice and sustainability. They're not a vegan school, of course, not there yet. But that was part of why I went to work for them in the first place. And they knew I was vegan when they hired me and knew I was passionate about climate justice and all of these things. So that was really great. And they were generally very supportive. And very quickly, all of my students knew I was vegan. I think the first time it was because I was wearing a vegan necklace and someone read the word vegan and was like, "Are you vegan?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then second time, I don't know. I mean, I let it come up a lot, and the students all love to ask questions. And I answered their questions. The thing that I've always been careful of, especially as an educator when I'm working with students that are minors, is I try not to tell them what to do or what is the right thing to do. So I answer questions about what I do. I share facts, I share science, I share information, but I'm never saying you have to do X. And that's kind of where I drew the line. So they all, you know, in environmental science, we watched Cowspiracy and had a discussion over it. It fit quite well in the curriculum. There's a whole section about agriculture. And so we delve into the science and that. Chemistry, it's not quite directly as relevant. It's more like a side conversation when it comes up. But that's just that's how I walked that line.
Oh, what a brilliant way to do it. So you didn't have any problems with, as the kids' memes would say, you know, the Karen, you know, like the mum coming in and like slapping her fist down on the table, you know, "How dare you teach my children this?"
No, I never had that. I mean, there were other things that came up, not so much about what I was saying. It was more when there were situations that involved food and I didn't want to purchase things. That's where things were tricky. But never really had an issue with the parents or anything like that.
Oh, brilliant. So how important is it that, you know, the kids are made aware of the truth, you know, like, I say, you know, you try and teach them, right, quite honestly, how important is that to you that we go straight with the truth?
Very important. I mean, that's how, I mean, it's one thing to just not share information. It's another thing if you're actively, which is what our society is doing, is actively teaching children and adults alike propaganda that is misinformation and not factual. So then you're not just not sharing the truth, you're actually lying to children and adults in society. And I think that is wrong, and that at the very least, we should not be doing that, but rather we should be sharing the truth. And that is what our public health system should be doing. That is what our government officials should be doing. And so we have to work to change those systems as well, to get that misinformation, to get dairy propaganda and campaigns out of schools, out of these environments, out of doctors' offices and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's such a huge thing over here, isn't it? You know, the dairy in schools, and yeah, it's just painful. But, you know, hearing about your mum, she sounds like an incredible lady. You know, hearing your story, I was just like, yay, what an awesome lady to do, you know, to just make that connection. And, you know, I guess she was in a pretty powerful place to make that connection at the time. But, you know, growing up the way that you did with parents that have always told you the truth, you know, what are some of the most valuable lessons that they've taught you growing up?
I mean, there's a lot. It's the biggest one, again, goes back to that critical thinking. And really, like, I have grown up with a lesson of I don't just blindly trust authority. I question everything and I research things. And this is something that I did try to teach my students as well. And like, even as a science teacher, I don't ever say like, oh, believe the scientists or listen to the scientists. I think that everyone should look at the science for themselves, because there's lots of different interpretations of the science. You can, and there's lots of different science out there funded by different organizations. So you can have a dairy scientist that's got all the credentials in the world. And I would rather that people actually go to the studies, go to the research, see who's funding them, look at the data for themselves, than just believe an authority figure that has credentials. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I walked away with, is I do my own research, I look into things. And then the other is that we don't have to kill animals to live happy and healthy lives. That's a huge one, and that's veganism. But I'm so grateful for those lessons. And then, I guess the other one that I think is really important is being raised vegan, where not everyone around me was by any means, really helped me understand that being different is okay. And that if we want a diverse society, especially with everything going on in our world with Black Lives Matter and social justice movements, to me, the issue isn't that there's difference. It's that difference isn't tolerated, and that we would do a lot better if, and like, I did have kids that made fun of my food or weird, smelly vegan stuff. And, but what that really taught me was everyone has differences. Like, there's going to be kids that have allergies. There's going to be kids that have different religions, different family lives, and we need to be tolerant of all of those differences and embrace them, rather than try and make everyone fit into a certain box about how they have to be.
Well, that's brilliant. I loved what you said in one of your YouTube videos about, when raising kids, if we keep to this structure of conformity and teaching them to be just like their peers and everyone around them, how are we ever going to create change? Because everyone's the same thing. So,
Yep.
Yeah, so when you were growing up, you attended many events and sort of demonstrations with your family as well, because it was a whole vegan life all throughout. When was it that you discovered your own independent voice, to speak out on the issues,
Mm-hmm. I think it's an ongoing process. I don't think there's like one point in time. I've been doing activism and speaking out for as long as I remember, but I would really say college is where I kind of got into it. I'd always been into it for myself, but that's where I started reading books on animal rights theory. That's where I started trying different things, listening to different authors and speakers, and figuring out what really made the most sense to me. And that's also when I started a group on the college campus I went to, that I led for 3 years, and did vegan activism. And that was sort of the first time where I didn't have my parents there with the support and backup, and I was doing it on my own. So that's really when it started, but I think it's an ongoing journey. I'm always learning more. I'm always adjusting my thinking and continuing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're in huge demand as a speaker, so, it's fantastic. And, we first discovered you earlier this year in the Climate Diet Summit, which was incredible. We just gone into lockdown, hadn't we, when that started? And, it was a brilliant and very productive way to spend our time. So, and you've been involved in countless amazing projects. Can you tell us about some of the ones that you've been a part of?
So there's the Climate Diet Summit, there's my own sort of YouTube channel, there's most of it's independent, and I have lots of ideas of future things, but one of the main places I've done a lot of stuff is a conference called Vegan Summerfest that I've been very involved in. I grew up attending the conference, and now I speak at it, and it's 5 days, and there's a lot of great activists that come and talk there. And that's where I've learned some of the most cutting edge new science, whether it's vegan nutrition or we talked about lab grown meat or all these sorts of things. Other projects I've been involved in the past, I worked with the nonprofit organization Tribe of Heart for a year. They produced Peaceable Kingdom and The Witness. And I did international outreach and some translation coordination work with them. And that was really neat. I tend to work very grassroots and individually with lots of people rather than any really large things.
Oh, brilliant. So recently you've left the classroom with everything happening with COVID and stuff like that, and you've started taking more of a focus on your activism via your YouTube channel, which we've sort of touched on briefly, you know. So it's called Born Vegan. It's I've been having an absolute binge the last couple of days, you know. So you'll see my thumbs up on quite a few of them. But can you tell us, for the viewers, you know, what your sort of channel focuses on?
Yeah, so it really started because while I do know other lifelong vegans, I didn't know that many that were really into activism and sort of really owned it for themselves. It was more like, oh, I was raised this way. This is what our family does. I do other things in the world. And so it really was motivated by, I wanted to speak out and share with people what it's like to grow up vegan, that it's a really big blessing. It's not brainwashing or this horrible thing where you're deprived. And it's to show just my perspective from that life experience on everything vegan related. And so I'm planning to do a lot more. I'm going to start posting really regularly again now, and planning to make a lot of videos on different topics, specifically on dairy, specifically on the environmental reasons for going vegan. It's going to be, if you want to learn more about veganism from a holistic perspective, so the ethical, animal rights, and environmental and health perspective, all from someone that has grown up this way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we've really been enjoying your videos, and for anyone, you know, I think you're so relatable to everyone, but particularly, you know, it's a great avenue for people, you know, younger people to go to as well, because, you know, you're so sort of warm and just enthusiastic, you know, because being vegan is such a hugely positive thing. You know, it is an exciting thing. It's great to be vegan, you know. So yeah, it's brilliant. We'll certainly make sure that we send all our viewers to your channel. One of the videos that we really liked was "The Future is Vegan: How Social Change Happens." It's one of the really brilliant ones that is on your YouTube channel. And in that video, you talk about everything from women getting the right to vote to doctors being told they have to wash their hands. And, you know, several more controversial histories and their origins. And these are all issues that we've previously had to fight for years to achieve, you know, even though they make completely total sense. So how has it been for you watching the world change from a lifetime even of veganism?
Yeah, I mean, that's been really fascinating. I mean, it gives me so much hope because I've seen so much more change than even in the last 5-10 years than I honestly ever expected. I mean, you know, I have a couple favorite stories I love to tell, but one of them, this happened just last year. I was on a plane getting ready to go to a vegan conference to speak, actually, and I sit down on the plane next to someone, and I just overhear this couple having a conversation about Beyond Meat. And they're like talking about like they need to purchase something, and not like them individually, but it sounds like on a bigger level. And I'm like, oh, you know, are you guys vegan or something? And they're like, no, we just own a restaurant and everybody's got to have a vegan menu these days, you know, so we're trying to figure out what ours is going to be. And that's just not a conversation even 5 years ago that I would have dreamed of having by chance on an airplane. Just totally random. And I mean, I would have been shocked if like 10 years ago you had told me that's a conversation I would have overheard. It has just changed so much in terms of the awareness, the knowledge about plant-based options, the number of companies providing plant-based foods to add to menus that are, you know, going huge. And the number of people that identify as vegan or are at least eating a plant-based diet has absolutely skyrocketed. And for example, like when I graduated high school, I didn't know a single other vegan in the entire school. 4 years later, when my sister graduated high school, she met about 5. And since then, some students that are there today, it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, all these people are vegan. It's just like, you know, and I would have been so excited to find a single vegan when I was in high school. So it's changing so rapidly. And I think we are a lot closer to pretty dramatic changes than we even realize.
Oh, wow, yeah. There's a lot of hope out there then, isn't there?
Absolutely.
But with seeing all this positive stuff, you must have heard about every silly argument there is against veganism, you know. And even for us, you know, we're coming up to 4 years now being vegan. We've heard so many and we get frustrated with it. Like, how do you deal with putting up with people after it? You know, for so long, you know, you see people hitting their heads against the brick wall.
Yeah, I mean, I try to remember that people are individuals, and I think growing up vegan actually has given me more ability to deal with it rather than just being sick of it. I recognize, like, I grew up vegan when no one around me was vegan, when everyone was saying those things. And today, lots of people, you've got Veg Fest in every city, you've got vegan meetups, you have Facebook groups, so much more support. And yeah, it can still be really easy to become so frustrated and just like, really? But it's just, I'm pretty used to it. And I have to remember that even if it's the, 5,000th time that I've heard something, for that person, it might be the first time they're asking it and they don't know. And so I just have to treat it as that's, and I've heard some really ridiculous things. Like, I remember a friend in college who was a biology major. We were talking or something, and she said something about, but don't plants have feelings? And I looked at her and I said, okay, so let me ask you, do you think animals are more closely related to plants or to people? And she goes, oh, plants, of course. And I'm like, you're studying biology. Like, there's the animal kingdom, then there's the plant kingdom. Humans and animals are in the animal kingdom, So, but that was her first time having that conversation. So I take it for what it is and discuss it, even though I may have heard it thousands of times.
Oh, that's a new one even on us. Yeah. We got the desert island one, didn't we, yesterday? And so yeah, that was the first time we'd actually had that. But there's a few going around. So I totally get what you mean about the change. Like Gareth said, we've been vegan coming up 4 years, and for us it's been a huge explosion even here in New Zealand of what is available now. And I had that moment like you did on the plane just recently. We were on a ferry going between the North and South Island, and I could hear the staff in the bar having a discussion about tofu. And I was so excited. I literally went up and I said, are you vegan? And they said, yeah. And so we started having this conversation about tofu, and we were sailing north and they were heading south. And so we were able to have this wonderful conversation about, where places to eat and that kind of thing. And it was great. I was just so excited because, for a long time, the only vegans that we really met were on Facebook. We didn't meet real life vegans. But now, and also, doing this series as well, we've realized that we are really not the minority that we think that we are sometimes. When you think that you're fighting this losing battle and that we're just a few and we're not doing, how are we ever going to get heard? It's brilliant to be doing this series, seeing how many people there are doing incredible things. I love what you have on your website about the tipping point. Would you be able to explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so the tipping point is basically, and it's an estimate, there's different social studies and social science suggesting different numbers, but it's kind of this idea that there's some percentage that when that number of people, whether it's 10%, 15%, even 20%, but when that percent of people in society all strongly hold a belief, that it creates a tipping point where things quickly spiral and can create social change. And I think that's really inspiring and really hopeful to realize, like, we don't actually need 80% of the world to go vegan to maybe have a vegan world, that it might only take 15% of the population really strongly believing that animals are not ours to use, and that will create all these systemic changes and ripple effects. So that's kind of the idea of the tipping point, that the number we really need is not anywhere as high as we think, if the group of people all strongly hold a certain belief.
One of our questions sort of follows on from that, and that's about, veganism is about shifting that paradigm to not exploit animals for any purpose, and so every individual who becomes a full vegan, full ethical vegan, helps to do that. How important is it that we get people to go vegan rather than just reducing their meat consumption, reducing the exploitation that they cause?
Yeah, so that's absolutely why it comes from that tipping point research. And the way I always think about it is, there's some people that really are working more on, just reducing the number of animals killed by people reducing meat consumption. But for me, if I had to choose between, say, 15% of the population becoming full ethical vegans versus having 90% of the population all reduce their meat consumption by, say, 90%, a lot of people would, think that 90% is the better option, because, wow, think about how much less meat we'd all be eating. Think about how many fewer animals would be killed. Like, you're gonna, that would do more than 15% of the population being vegan. But I think we have to ask what our end goal is, and that's where those differences really come in. And if your end goal really is just to reduce the number of animals killed, great, then choose the meat reduction option. But if your goal is to create a vegan world where animals are not used or killed or exploited for human purposes, then I think having 15% of the population be full ethical vegans is a lot closer to that, because then they might be that percent that can shift our species' paradigm to a vegan paradigm. And people reducing their meat consumption, no matter, even if you're reducing most of your meat consumption, if you still believe that it's okay to kill animals, then you're not part of that shifting paradigm. But I do also just want to say that I think there's a difference when we're talking about, like, reducing meat consumption at the systemic level to when you're dealing with an individual one-on-one. So if I'm dealing with someone in front of me and I'm talking to them about the problems with animal exploitation or the environmental problems, and they're like, or, even a personal friend saying, hey, guess what? I only eat meat twice a week now, and I've been doing this. And then I'm not going to just sit there and be like, oh, no, that's no good. I'm going to be supportive and continue encouraging them on that path. So I think that's a big distinction. Like, I'm never going to tell people to reduce their meat consumption. I'm going to tell people to go vegan and that that's what we want to achieve. But I also recognize that individuals are on a journey and that they might reduce meat consumption along the way to eventually going vegan.
Oh, what a brilliant answer.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great way of looking at it. And, in this world of political correctness, we're all taught to tiptoe around, making judgments about others' actions, but at the same time, here we all are, we're trying to fight social justice, ecological justice, animal injustice. How are we supposed to move forward and create change when we've been conditioned to sort of turn a blind eye or not, talk about the realities of things for fear of causing offense, especially in the case of animal exploitation. So, having been encouraged to speak out against these issues for all of your life, what do you find the best way of communicating? You probably just touched on it just before, but, is there anything that you would add to that? Because I hear people all the time, and I have to really, in the case of vegetarians, when people hear about animal cruelty, and then I see people say, oh, thank goodness I'm vegetarian. And I'm just like, yeah, thank goodness. That's, but so I need to move on from that or find a different way. Yeah. Well, what are your tips of communicating effectively?
Yeah. So, I'm a big fan of the Socratic method. And so the two things that sort of characterize my approach are, one, I try to see every person in front of me and that I'm ever talking to as an individual. So I don't make assumptions about what their beliefs might be or what they care about or who they are as a person, no matter really what they're saying. If they're engaging with me, I'm going to listen and I'm going to try and really understand where they're coming from. And then two is part of that is the Socratic method. It's asking questions to understand. And I do a lot of street activism, a lot of talking to people. I've done film screenings, a bunch of different things. And I always, for me, it's about trying to get to sort of the root issue of like, let's unpack what your beliefs are. Because one, I think most people actually agree with the basic idea of veganism. They agree that it's wrong to hurt animals unnecessarily. So I want to show them that that's their belief and their actions just aren't in alignment with that. But two, I don't think most people are actually anti-speciesist yet. Like, they might agree it's wrong to hurt animals unnecessarily, but I think they usually think animals are lesser than us somehow. And so I ask questions to get to the why. So for example, when I was showing some footage, this was back in college again, and I had some people that were like, well, I agree factory farming is bad, but you know, small family backyard farming, like that's fine. And so I would basically ask, well, you know, why do you think it's okay to kill animals? Like, let's get right to it. Like, you're basically saying it's okay to kill animals and not people. You recognize it's wrong not to kill people. And if they're like, well, because they're different than us. Okay, how are they different than us? And I want to pin down, like, do you think it's their intelligence? Do you think it's their ability to feel pain? Like, what is it that makes it okay to kill animals for food and not people? And then and a lot of times they can't name that thing, but if they can name the trait, then I try and reframe it and say, so if there was a human that had a lower intelligence, would that mean then it's okay to kill that human? So it's a combination of asking questions and then framing. Like, framing is everything. So taking whatever they're saying and then drawing a comparison in some way. And I am very careful about the language I use, and I try not to, and a really good example of this is the term, you know, animal slavery, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. I avoid using that term, not because I don't think it's true, but because I think it will turn a lot of people off and they won't be able to hear what we're saying. So when there are terms like that people have expressed are problematic or that they disagree with, I do try to find other terms just because I think that is more effective, mainly in terms of, if I can say, oh, animals that are confined and imprisoned, and it means basically the same thing, but it's not going to be that term where flags go off in their head and they're like, oh, you know, I'm not talking to these people anymore. I try to do that as well. So that's kind of my approach: asking questions, being understanding, and then drawing comparisons, you know, sort of reframing things in if that was a human, or let's take what you said and put it in this context. Does it stand? That type of thing.
Well, thank you. That's a brilliant answer. I think we're going to have to get and do a video special on the Socratic method, because we talked recently to Joey Carbstrong, and he's another one who really uses that method. And when you see his videos, you know, you just watch it, you can see the full steps of it.
Yeah.
But one video I really enjoyed on your channel was about talking about cultured meats, or as most of us know, it's lab-grown meats. And I think it's something a lot of us vegans know about, well, know of, but they don't really know what it's about. And, you know, a lot of us are told, you know, as vegans, we should be supporting this cruelty-free method of creating meat. To me, it just seems disgusting. But can you tell us a little bit about it? You know, just a little bit of Can you tell us a little? Can I just stumble some more? Can you just explain a little bit about, you know, what this lab-grown meat sort of is, you know, and why it's not vegan?
You can tell he's vegan because he's gone beetroot.
Yeah, absolutely. So And you're right. A lot of people are really pushing vegans to support this, which is one of the things that I find problematic about this. And part of the reason I think that people are pushing it is because this is something that the large pharmaceutical and biotech companies have figured out. Sort of, veganism wasn't popular when there isn't a way that these corporations can capitalize on it. And I think lab-grown meat has provided a way where the biotech companies can capitalize on this trend. So now it's being promoted and now it's being pushed on vegans and in the vegan community. And these biotech companies are acting like they suddenly support, animal rights or something, or using less animals, even though, like, when you've been criticizing them for animal experimentation for years, they said nothing or, continued doing it. So I think that's important to and that's another follow the money thing. Like, who really stands to profit off of this? But the reason it's not vegan is because as it stands right now, and this is also a rapidly changing science and technology. And so we do kind of need to stay update. And I haven't checked, in the last couple months or so on what new progress there is. But the main way that it's being made involves regularly taking biopsies from animals. And the technology is not there yet to create these supposed immortal cell lines where you don't have to take tissue from animals again, but you take it once, now you just grow it in a lab indefinitely, and you produce all the meat you want from that. That's sort of what some people are putting forth as their end goal. But we are really nowhere near that, or nowhere near scaling it up. So in the meantime, there are lots of scientists that are repeatedly taking tissue and flesh and cells from different kinds of animals. And they're claiming, oh, well, it's just a small biopsy. But that's still animal experimentation. That's still animal exploitation. And then the main way that most of these cells are grown are in a growth medium that uses something called fetal bovine serum. And fetal bovine serum is basically blood from baby cows. And the way they get it is extremely gruesome. And that is, and I say this as someone who worked with human cancer cell lines in a lab, that is the standard. And it's, they get it as a sort of a byproduct from slaughterhouses. It's everywhere in labs. Even a non-animal testing lab that I once worked in, they use slaughterhouse byproducts and fetal bovine serum and antibodies extracted from animals. Like, in so much of molecular biology and cell biology, you have animal products at so many different stages. And I know that they are working to change that. There are people working on trying to find plant-based growth mediums, but we're not there yet. And so in the name of some future goal, we are currently exploiting animals. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's why it's not vegan. There is a basis for maybe someday it will be. But then the idea is, if our goal is to really, again, overturn speciesism, doesn't suddenly saying, oh, well, let's still keep eating animal tissue and animal flesh, even if it's grown in the lab, doesn't that kind of undermine our idea that, we don't need animals, we don't need to exploit them, we don't need meat, which is what vegans have been saying for years. And now we're like, actually, maybe we do need it. We're just going to provide it a different way. So I think that's kind of a little bit mixed messaging and might be undermining some of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I really advise people go and check out that video, because you've got a full 45-minute talk and plus a shorter one as well on it. And one of the things that I really hit me as well was how you talked about the meat and sort of dairy sort of industry as well, sort of saying, let's get back this, because then we've got a competitor to our product, and no one's going to want to eat this lab stuff because it's it's GMO. We're already so worried about that. So in fact, by supporting this, this product they're trying to push at us vegans, we're actually supporting them in a more subversive sort of way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. No, it was really interesting because, yeah, I mean, as vegans, you want to get behind things and think, yeah, you're helping to create change. And although I've never been one for having imitation meat products, I'll always just mash up some beans and make something out of that instead. But, as a concept, you kind of think, oh, yeah, well, that's cool. That's something we should probably be supporting. But then when you find out the real procedure, it's like, hang on, if I'm vegan, I don't even want a cell from an animal. Like that's not being vegan. Eating animal cells is not vegan. So yeah, it's really good, and it's another great explanation of why we really need to ask those questions and be informed and do our research. For me, it was a bit more lighthearted in comparison, but I loved your video with the wonderful Dr. Michael Greger. He is a huge favorite, and particularly the part I love is when you ask him if it's safe for parents to raise their children on a vegan diet. And he replies, it's not safe for them not to raise them on a vegan diet, which I think is perfect. And, it's a great example of the diversity of content that you have on your YouTube channel, Born Vegan. You've got so much great information on there, especially, for parents who are looking to raise their children vegan, or just need a little bit of advice and support. Have you got any other suggested videos that people should be checking out?
I'd also recommend the video I have. I think it's why I haven't failed as a vegan. And that's kind of where I talk about all of the societal pressures that parents face, and that if you're not conscious about it, you might not even realize that that's what is causing you to think the way you are. And I share some examples of how, like, when I did, have my arm pulled out of socket, or something happened that my parents, when they didn't know as many people that had been, raised vegan, even though they thought at that time the science still said vegan diets were healthy, they were still nervous. And so their, immediate thought would be, oh no, is it, her weak bones because we're feeding her vegan? And that's the reality when you're doing something that is so different than everyone else in society, that's different than the mainstream advice, that's different than what doctors are telling you. And so if you're not really careful and conscious that that's what's happening when you start thinking that way, then it can be all too easy to fall prey to that. There's every so often, I think there was another one recently of, why I'm not vegan anymore video that comes out. And one of them in the last week or two, I think, was someone saying they didn't feel comfortable raising their kids that way. They're afraid they aren't getting enough nutrients or whatever. And that's where I want to say, if you know the science and you know this, like, that's a fear. That's a psychological fear. That's society. That's the propaganda getting to you. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to help parents be aware of that, so that, because I think once you recognize it for what it is, then it's easier to say, oh, that's where those fears are coming from. That's what that is. I'm not gonna let that get to me. But if you don't recognize it for that, it's way too easy to just go with it and like fall off the wagon and think you really are, I'm doing something wrong here. So I'd recommend that video.
Yeah, we watched that one, didn't we? Yeah. That was a good one. And it's so true, it just makes you cringe when that happens. And, it's like, look at what Dr. Greger and the Dr. Clappers of the world and the Dr. Campbells, they're all fighting to get this information out there, so that you've got this knowledge that is, indisputable. Why do you feel the need to do that when we've got all this information getting out there? It's just, beyond belief.
Yeah. So are there any other activists or even, doctors who inspire you?
There's a lot of them. And I must say, I tend to really like grassroots activists, and the people that really inspire me are people like you guys, people in their own community that are doing what they can. They are the school teachers that are working slowly to veganize their own classroom or their administration. And I think those people don't get enough recognition, because we really like to hold up heroes and big names. And like, there are lots of inspiring people that are leaders. But this has to be a grassroots movement, and this has to come down to the people as well. And so I love seeing what individuals in their own workplace, in their own school, in their own company are doing in their little community, because there's people that are making huge impacts and change just locally that we don't hear about, that we don't see or know about, and I love that.
Yeah. Oh well, thank you. And yeah, we feel very much the same, because the thing is, the machine doesn't work without the smallest cogs. You know, every part of it, you know, all brings it together. And yeah, there's so many, and hopefully we're going to have quite a few of those on there. Like we've got another speaker coming up during the show who turned the island of Aruba almost vegan, you know, like with all making sure there's options everywhere, you know, and just someone doing that in their community. It's just wonderful.
I love to see it. Really made me smile yesterday, seeing you being interviewed by a young lady called Olivia. And I think she's been doing her YouTube activism since she was, what, 10 years old?
Olivia Sampson?
Yes.
Yes. I think, I'm not exactly sure when she started her YouTube channel, maybe, but she's also another lifelong vegan. Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's, you know, seeing interviews like that, it really gives you hope for the future. And, you know, we were saying yesterday, every vegan child that we've met, they're just so switched on. They are so switched on, and they do ask those questions, and they do have that truth. I mean, you know, we even came across a family the other day who they sat with their daughter and watched Dominion with her at 5 years old. And, you know, they said, look, we're going to support you through this. But she asked the questions. She wanted to know, you know, so they said, okay, well, if you want us to stop at any stage, but she's got that information, and she's, you know, she's never going to go against that now because she's got it. She knows, you know, so it's fantastic, you know, really looking forward to seeing more young activists coming out as well. We've spoken about your YouTube channel, Born Vegan. Where else can our viewers follow you for more information, updates, and goodies?
So I'm also on Facebook at Born Vegan, and Instagram. I think it's Sarina Farb now. Sarina Farb there, Born Vegan on Facebook, and my website is bornvegan.org. And you can sign up for my email list there as well.
Oh, brilliant. And are there any other projects you're currently working on, or any other projects you want to give a mention to whilst we're here?
I have a lot I'm working on, but none at a stage where I am ready to tell people about them. But
no worries. We'll have to keep up to
stay
date.
Updated and
Yeah.
Definitely. No, we will do that. Well, yeah, I guess that's another reason that, you know, you're not in the classroom now. You've obviously got plenty in the pipeline, and that's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah. I know with you and Alison doing the Climate Diet Summit, you know, I guess that was something with the whole COVID thing that you weren't anticipating for it to be like it was. Is that right? I remember, you know, it wasn't going to be a virtual thing at that stage.
No, it was.
Okay.
We had been planning it as virtual for a long time. But we just pushed it back because when the COVID thing hit, we weren't sure, you know, it's crisis mode. Is anybody really going to pay attention to the climate crisis when, you know, we're in a pandemic? So that kind of, but it was, we had planned it to be a virtual summit long before that. So luckily, I'm very grateful for that too, that was just a happy coincidence that was not an in-person event, and we didn't have to scramble and try and change that at the last minute. So
brilliant.
No, we really enjoyed that. Is it going to be any more, or are you not allowed to say that yet?
Possibly. I mean, we are, I'd say there's a good chance we will do more with that in the future for sure. Maybe rerun that, maybe bring in some new speakers and do one next year, make it an annual thing. Nothing's set yet.
Oh, that would be awesome. We learned so much, and really enjoyed it. So thank you to both you and Alison for bringing that to everybody. And thank you for being such a brilliant role model in everything that you do. You know, it's fantastic to finally meet a lifelong vegan, and, you know, I can't turn back the clock, but you know, there's so many positives to raising your children vegan. And, you know, I think a lot of parents who are raising, you know, vegan children can learn so much from you, and just be so inspired and encouraged from how you've turned out, for want of a better expression.
And I think also, you know,
thank you.
I think also for the kids growing up, vegan, just having you as a role model to look up to, it's just wonderful. And yeah, you're amazing. You're doing amazing things, and I really hope things just keep getting bigger and better, and you get your message out there to more people, because we need more role models like you.
Keep working towards a tipping point. Now I know what it is. So yeah, now I've got another goal to work towards. It's a great one.
Well, thank you. And thank you, both of you, for what you're doing. This is very cool. And keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. To support our speaker, follow the links provided in the description. You can keep up to date with the series by subscribing to our YouTube channel at VeganFTA, and also following our Facebook page, Instagram, or Pinterest. If you've enjoyed this series and you want to support it, you can also consider joining our Patreon. Every little helps, and your love and support goes a long way. Thanks for watching.